Policy is policy, Patricia snapped, shoving a citation against my chest as I signed Elena into triage. Your wife can't park at the curb. Find a crew to move the car, or we tow it. I stared at the paper, then at her HOA badge glinting under the fluorescent lights. Elena's breath trembled beside me, her hand gripping mine. I'm a licensed paramedic, I said, voice steady. This is an emergency intake. EMTLA mandates uninterrupted access to care, and that curb is a hospital drop zone, monitored by 3 cameras. Patricia's smirk faltered, but she doubled down. HOA rules apply. I held her gaze. Not here, and not when a patient's stability is on the line. Elena squeezed my hand tighter, her high-risk pregnancy at 30 weeks sending cramps rolling through her like waves. We planned for bed rest, quiet nights, not an HOA president tailing us to the ER, lecturing through the windshield as my wife winced. The curb mattered because seconds mattered. The citation mattered because foreclosure threats were stapled to it. But what mattered most was the heartbeat we'd seen on a grainy ultrasound screen last week. Fast, stubborn, alive. A triage nurse glanced up, caught the scene, and slid the clipboard out of Patricia's reach. A small win. I need your name for the record, I said, keeping my tone even. It's 8:12 p.m. You attempted to interfere with intake. The ceiling dome above us stores 30 days of video, and security tags clips for medical necessity. Patricia muttered about documenting a violation, but her pen hesitated. Document your exit, the nurse said sharply, wheeling Elena toward vitals. I followed, noting the wall clock, the camera angles, the faces of witnesses to Patricia's overreach. Evidence lived in small details. The hum of the air handler, the squeak of the wheelchair, the barcode on Elena's wristband. I'd won arguments in courtrooms without raising my voice. You just lined up the moments and let them speak. At registration, I introduced myself the way I always did when stakes were high. Daniel Reyes, paramedic, husband. Contractions spiked at home, 3 minutes apart. We parked at the curb because walking from the lot would have cost time we didn't have. The registrar nodded, eyes flicking to Patricia, still looming like a storm cloud. We'll notify security, I added. Ask them to preserve footage from the entrance cam, triage desk, and curb. I'll request a copy. Elena's monitor chirped steadily, and for a moment, the world narrowed to her pulse on the screen and the memory of my father's hand on my shoulder the day I passed my paramedic exam. He said I'd carry strangers through their worst moments. He didn't warn me I'd battle neighbors, too. Patricia lingered at the doorway, phone raised, narrating to no one who mattered. I didn't give her the satisfaction of a glance. I had a patient, a family, a legacy, and training that turned chaos into a checklist, fear into process, outrage into facts. A security officer stepped between us, asking if I wanted to file an interference note. I nodded, and he took Patricia's name. By the time Elena's wristband printed and the timestamp hit our chart, the HOA had crossed a line they couldn't uncross. They thought a citation could scare me, that a threat could move me. They were wrong. I'd spent 15 years charting vital signs, calling codes, convincing death to wait. In my office at home, my father's old medical kit sat on a shelf like a promise I still kept. When Elena was stabilized in a curtained bay, I stepped into the night air. The glow of Willow Bend's entrance sign caught my eye, our neighborhood polished to perfection, with trimmed hedges, identical mailboxes, and sidewalks pressure-washed every Friday. Patricia sold an illusion of control, but behind it lay resentment layered deep. Weeks earlier, she'd fined a veteran for hanging a flag at an angle. A young couple faced penalties for their kids' chalk drawings. Another resident, Mrs. Larkin, was threatened with foreclosure over a wheelchair ramp that didn't match the community's aesthetic. Each time, Patricia smiled and said, "Rules are rules." I drove slowly through the neighborhood, Elena's overnight bag still on the seat. Porch lights burned in neat rows, but curtains twitched as I passed. People noticed things here. The hospital story would travel faster than any posted notice. I parked outside our townhouse and stepped into the quiet street, the air thick with pine mulch and asphalt. Sprinklers hissed in the distance. My father's medical kit, resting on its shelf inside, carried symbolic weight. He believed in service, not domination. Patricia's leadership was the opposite, a tight grip on appearances, even if it meant strangling humanity. Her smug words, "Policy is policy," echoed in my mind, but real policy, written into law, didn't bend to her agenda. That was the flaw I'd exploit. My training sharpened me to see the gap between procedure and reality. Tonight, that gap had cracked wide open. At dawn, I walked the street with a clipboard, logging houses hit with fines, ramps, flags, cars parked an inch too far onto a curb. Each was a story, a fracture in Patricia's control. Residents whispered from porches, some warning me, some thanking me quietly. Their silence was fear, but their eyes held recognition. Mark Dillon sat on his stoop, his retired security guard posture stiff, his HOA badge clipped to his belt despite his day off. When I nodded, he gave a curt nod back, then looked away, burdened by something unsaid. He'd been in the hospital lobby, his hand tightening on his bag strap when Patricia made her move. He hadn't stopped her, but he hadn't helped either. Patricia thrived because people stayed quiet, but silence could break if the right evidence surfaced. I already had the first piece, time-stamped video of her interference. With testimonies of past overreaches, a narrative would form. Courts didn't care about gossip, they cared about consistency. Inside my house, I placed my notes beside my father's medical kit, two relics, one of duty, one of resistance. Elena's voice called softly from upstairs, home now on bed rest. The stakes lived in our home, in the steady rhythm of a baby not yet born. I drafted a report like I would after an emergency run, objective, precise, unemotional. Incident date, witness names, potential violations. I didn't embellish. Patricia had supplied the details herself. Looking out at the street, with its obedient hedges and flawless paint, I saw the cost of perfection, fear, fines, humiliation. But with one report and one recording, the cost had shifted. Patricia thought she could write over lives with her rules. She didn't know she'd already given me the tools to unwrite her power. But evidence alone rarely topples power. Power cracks when someone close to it can't carry the weight anymore. In Willow Bend, that someone was Mark Dillon. I found him the next evening at the community clubhouse, a hollow brick building at the neighborhood's heart. Rows of folding chairs leaned against a wall, the carpet smelling of bleach. A bulletin board displayed Patricia's notices, her typed signature on each. Mark sat at a table, a mug before him, his HOA badge upside down as if he couldn't bear to see it. His posture was rigid, but his fingers tapped restlessly, betraying the calm he projected. He'd seen Patricia cross the line in the hospital. I needed him to admit it, not to me, but where it mattered most. His shoulders hunched, signaling fear of losing his small paycheck, his status as Patricia's enforcer. I approached slowly, not as a neighbor seeking revenge, but as a paramedic who'd walked into chaos countless times. I knew strain, the flex of his jaw, the way his hand hovered over the badge. His conscience was louder than his loyalty, but he fought to mute it. "Long night?" I asked, neutral. His eyes flicked up, then away. He lifted his mug but didn't drink, holding it until his hand trembled. The pause said everything. He carried the hospital scene like a weight strapped to his chest. I'd seen that posture in accident witnesses, people who wanted to step forward but feared the fallout. On the wall, a poster listed the HOA's values: integrity, community first. Mark's gaze drifted there, his lips pressing thin. The contradiction burned him. I leaned on the chair opposite him. What happened last night is on video. Footage doesn't lie. But what matters more is whether witnesses admit what they saw. His shoulders tightened, a bead of sweat tracing down his temple. I laid my incident report on the table, not sliding it closer, just letting it sit, an anchor for the truth he carried. His eyes lingered on it. He reached for his mug, but his grip faltered, coffee sloshing onto the table. He swore, dabbing at the spill with shaky hands. That tremor wasn't caffeine, it was conscience. Patricia's hold on him was slipping. I don't need your answer tonight, I said evenly. But you know what you saw, and you know the difference between rules and harm. As I left, his chair scraped, as if he almost stood, then settled. That hesitation was a man at war with himself. Outside, streetlights bathed the manicured lawns in artificial glow. Patricia believed she commanded loyalty, but loyalty bound by fear didn't survive when someone realized they'd been protecting cruelty. Mark was unraveling, and with him, Patricia's wall of silence would crack. The next morning, a fresh violation notice was taped to our door, bright orange, impossible to miss. Unauthorized structure. It read, the temporary ramp I'd built for Elena's bed rest, safe and removable, but circled in red ink like a crime. Neighbors' eyes darted from the ramp to me, then down. Patricia was testing whether she could bleed us into compliance, even as Elena fought for stability inside. I folded the notice neatly, adding it to my folder. Every notice was a brick in the case against her, proof not of order, but harassment. My job was to stack those bricks until her foundation collapsed. That afternoon, Patricia held a special board inspection at the community pool. She stood under a striped canopy, clipboard in hand, flanked by 2 board members. The pool was empty, the air heavy with chlorine. She'd chosen her stage to display power. Mr. Reyes, she called, voice carrying, your violations exceed $5,000. Noncompliance risks legal action, including a lien or foreclosure. I met her gaze. You followed me into a hospital and interfered with emergency intake. That's not a violation, it's a crime recorded. The board members shifted uneasily. Patricia's jaw clenched, but she pressed on. This community thrives on order. You undermine it. I produced my log, addresses, dates, absurd fines, and held it steady, letting her see her system reflected back. Order doesn't come from crushing people. It comes from respecting them. Your pattern shows the opposite. One board member glanced at the log, then away. Patricia snapped her fingers for attention, but doubt had seated. Every escalation deepened her exposure. Cameras above the gate blinked red. Another witness, another piece of evidence. That evening, I returned to Elena, resting with a book on her lap. She asked how bad it was. I told her Patricia had doubled down, but every step she took was a step into her own trap. In my office, I set the newest notice beside my father's medical kit. The ramp outside was a lifeline for Elena and our child, not an eyesore. Patricia measured power in fines. I measured it in lives preserved. Her hunger for control blinded her, and blindness made her careless. Her carelessness would tip the balance from intimidation to accountability. The hospital was the next battleground. Patricia had crossed the sharpest line there, and proving interference with medical care could undo her. I walked into the administrative wing, a beige corridor lined with certificates, the air humming with printers. At the desk, I requested the risk management officer, Karen Lee. Her office was stacked with binders, dates, incident codes, the language of compliance. I need to file an interference report, I said, voice calm, like testifying after an accident call. Your cameras captured a non-staff individual obstructing emergency intake. I laid out the sequence. Time of arrival, citation against my chest, Elena's contractions, Patricia's attempt to block intake. Karen typed, nodding. If it happened as you say, the footage will show it. We retain 30 days. A technician wheeled in a monitor, keyed in the timestamp. Grainy footage showed Patricia thrusting the paper, Elena clutching her abdomen, the nurse pushing the clipboard away. Each frame was damning. The technician confirmed the clip would be archived, handing me a chain of custody form. I signed, locking the record into evidence. This was my discovery. No rummaging, no rumors, just a paramedic using the system he knew best. Hospitals didn't forget, and Patricia's overreach now lived in files that couldn't be erased. As I left, fluorescent lights buzzed, the hall smelling of antiseptic and ink. My father's medical kit came to mind, its leather-worn soft. Patricia had walked into the most documented environment possible and handed me the tools to unwrite her power. The footage, the log, the witnesses, they were bricks, and I was building a case she couldn't outrun.